And breaking news coming in at this point in time, President Donald Trump has indeed announced tariffs, additional tariffs for China. These are retaliatory tariffs after the retaliatory tariffs that have been slapped by China on the United States of America. On his social media post, he just wrote that based on lack of respect that China has shown to the world markets, he now is raising the tariff charge to China by the United States of America to 125%. This is from 104% to 125%. An additional tax after China said they are not going to give in. Major news coming in. At some point, he says, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. That's breaking news coming in. He adds that conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States, including Department of Commerce, Treasury and USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subject being discussed, the trade tariff barriers, currency manipulation, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape or form against the United States, those who have not, I've authorized a 90-day pause. So two big breaking news coming in. One, that the United States of America, Donald Trump, now has announced a retaliatory tariff on China, increasing it from 104% to 125%. And additionally, he's also announced a major announcement here, a 90-day pause for all those countries who have shown respect to the United States of America and its decisions and approached the U.S. government ministries and departments to ensure that negotiations begin before the tariffs actually come into play. So, two major decisions. Again, and he's also set a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. So 90-day pause, going back to just the baseline of 10%. The math that Trump and his team did of various slabs for various countries does not apply right now. 10% baseline, certainly, he says, will be effective immediately. And all those countries who have retaliated, particularly China, is going to bear the brunt of the tariff war that we're seeing. This is big news that's coming in. Trump now imposing tariffs on China. China went ahead and slapped tariffs and took it up to 84% after America announced a 104% tariff. And now, after looking at Chinese retaliation, the statements that have come in, they're digging in their heels. They're saying they're going to continue fighting America to the end. Donald Trump, in a post, announces a 125% increase in tariffs for China. That is massive. Expect a bloodbath. They expect a bloodbath in various markets across the globe. But interestingly, what we're looking at is a surge in the markets in United States of America, 5% surge in markets in the United States of America. So that is huge. These are just initial feelers coming in from markets opening in the United States of America to this news, but also in green. We'll have to wait and see how the markets react to this news through the day. This is just the beginning. The markets opened and in the morning are in the green in the United States of America. Trump has paused tariff on 75 countries. That's huge. The various slabs of additional tariffs that were added to various countries, that has now been put on a hiatus. It is on a pause for the time being, but China is not being spared. Trump has slapped additional tariffs on China, 125% tax on Chinese goods. Now, what is Trump saying? He's saying China disrespected world's markets. It was a bilateral tariff war between China and the United States of America. American President Donald Trump has broad-based it, saying that Beijing is disrespecting world markets by slapping retaliatory tariffs on America. This is the biggest trade war, the biggest ever tariff war that the world is witnessing today between the two biggest economies of the world, the United States of America and China. The US is very clear in how it's going to take its trade and tariff war forward. Any country that is not acquiescing or agreeing with Washington, D.C. will face tariffs and an increase in tariffs if there's retaliation. Beijing, on the other hand, with Xi Jinping in charge, says they're not going to give in. But what does this mean for the markets? We have Siddharth Zarabi joining us, Managing Editor, Business Today. Siddharth, this is huge. We're looking at the biggest tariff war that the world has ever seen, and now the US president has announced 125% tariff on Chinese goods.
Well, the real key takeaway at this point of time is that Donald Trump has buckled down to what has been happening to the American economy, the massive rise in costs, the consequent inflationary spiral that would be witnessed, the demands from literally hundreds of top economists, business leaders, and other authorities in the United States who have beseeched President Trump that 90 days is the minimum time that should be given for the trade negotiations to come through properly. This pause, therefore, means that the carnage that we have been witnessing in the American markets and globally will come to a stop. We can already see live data from the markets where we can see that the Dow Jones Index, one of the key stock market index, is up 6%. This is not the first time that this news has come out. This news had also come out around 48 hours ago, but then the White House subsequently denied that. But with this pause, the most significant thing is that Donald Trump has paused his battle against the world, but he is continuing his battle with China. And instead of 104%, this is the third hike that he has announced, taking the overall duty against China to as much as 125%. This 125% increase happens on account of the fact that China has retaliated earlier and imposed the 84% duty on US imports. So there is a trade war that is underway. Make no mistake, that has not been paused. But instead of Trump fighting with the world, he has now restricted the fight temporarily for a 3-month period with only China. So
that's a very interesting. Right, Siddharth, very interestingly put. Let's just put it in perspective for our viewers as well. Two-pronged approach over here. One is that he is now singularly going to be focused on fighting China. And secondly, to have a hiatus, a pause for all the other countries when it comes to tariffs. Because, Siddharth, Donald Trump cannot absorb the losses that US is suffering or could suffer should he take the entire world on.
Well, the losses are actually coming home to small businesses in the United States, and they are also coming home to buyers in the United States. There is a very, very viral story that is underway, and that is in fact been done exclusively by the New York Post and then was carried by Fox News of all platforms. And that story is of a small business owner who was paying $26,000 on tariffs, and on account of what has happened, that went up to almost $346,000. And basically, that business, and God knows how many other businesses, will not be able to pass on these costs to consumers. A lot of people have gone and pointed out that there is a fallacy in belief in the United States in certain sections which believes that foreign governments and nations will pay these taxes. The way trade works is that the buyer of the good from any other country bears the cost of the duties levied and passes them on to his or her consumer. That is a fundamental truth of the way global trade works, whether you import a screw or whether you import a aircraft. And that reality has hit home. So obviously, I repeat this point, Peter Navarro and his theories of the trade gap between two nations being closed with a blunt instrument of customs duties
Right.
is an untested theory, which for now Trump seems to have taken pause on.
Right, Siddharth, we also have Karishma Asudani, but before I go to her, just one clarification. By the end of the post that he's put out, he says a 90-day pause and substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10% also effective immediately. So are we to understand that slabs have gone, but the 10% baseline remains?
So the 10% tariff was the first slab, and this slab was to kick in the interim while trade negotiations happen.
Yeah, on the 2nd of April.
The next slab kicked in because trade negotiations didn't happen, and obviously they couldn't have happened in a matter of days. So what the tweet makes it clear is 10% is here to stay. But for example, in India's case, it is no longer 26%. For now, it is just 10%. But the other two slabs, barring China, have been put on pause. So 10% remains. The rest has been put on pause, except for China, which instead has been hit with another increase of almost 21%, taking the total duty to 125%.
Right. So that's stay on with us. Just going to Karishma. Karishma, like Siddharth was saying, the markets have surged in response to the decision that has been made. But this is also a clear case of what Donald Trump is thinking right now. For now, it's an announcement of a hiatus. The markets are looking good. What are your expectations when it comes to not just the global markets, but also how India is going to react to the pause on the reciprocal tariffs?
You know, while the markets have reacted, the Dow has been surged by 1,800 points. It's very important to understand that this still creates a high-risk economic situation with several potential consequences, because a U.S.-China trade war escalation only hints at a further stock market volatility. And let's not forget that a lot of other countries, for example, how the EU works, Europe, especially Germany, they rely highly on U.S.-China trade stability. So this is still, I'd not say that we are out of danger. However, this could create both an opportunity.
The United States, and as I said at the podium yesterday, when you punch at the United States of America, President Trump is going to punch back harder. In that same vein, we have had more than 75 countries from around the world reach out to President Trump and his team here at the White House to negotiate better trade deals for the American worker. We have been overwhelmed with the amount of requests from countries around the world. I'll let the Secretary speak to that. We will continue with the tailor-made negotiations that I spoke about yesterday. In the meantime, there will be a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs as these negotiations are ongoing, and the tariff level will be brought down to a universal 10% tariff. The Secretary here has been a huge part of the President's trade team, of course, and will continue to lead these negotiations moving forward to look out for the American worker, which is always President Trump's goal. So I'll kick it over to our great Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent.
Good, thank you. And we saw the successful negotiating strategy that President Trump implemented a week ago today. It has brought more than 75 countries forward to negotiate. It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. And what we have ended up with here, as I told everyone a week ago, they're in this very spot, do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. So every country in the world who wants to come and negotiate, we are willing to hear you. We're going to go down to a 10% baseline tariff for them, and China will be raised to 125 due to their insistence on escalation.
Ed, go ahead.
Secretary, thank you for doing this. Let me ask you three quick things, if I could, just for the sake of clarity, because the markets are open and they're wondering. First of all, Mexico and China, are they part of this 10% universal?
Well, China, no, China.
Mexico and Canada, are they part of the 10%?
Yes.
Okay. Second, given then that you have the rest of the world essentially calling it, it's not China, is this now just all about China?
Well, it's about bad actors, and what we will see is some of the very early countries are China's neighbors. That we're going to see. I'm seeing Vietnam today. Japan's at the front of the queue. South Korea, India. So we will see. And as I've repeatedly said, and President Trump has been saying it for years, China is the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and they are the biggest source of the U.S. trade problems. And indeed, they are problems for the rest of the world, because what we've seen is that as the U.S. announced a tariff wall last week, many of those goods have already started flooding into Europe.
So as you see it now, this trade war is China versus the rest of the world?
Well, I'm not calling it a trade war, but I'm saying that China has escalated, and President Trump responded very courageously to that, and we are going to work on a solution with our trading partners.
And if I could just, excuse me, Raquel, if I could just add to what the Secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them. And that's exactly why more than 75 countries have called, because the United States of America is the best place in the world to do business. And as the president has shown great courage, as the Secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher. Elena, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Treasury Secretary Vesson. Can you explain more of the decision-making on what feels like a reversal here? I mean, just these went into effect less than 15 hours ago, these tariffs. Why the pause now? What led to that?
No. Again, President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago. The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago. They were announced a week ago, and we've just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith. So we are expecting them to come with their best deal. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate, hold your ground, let's see what happens. And China, they kept escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
Mr. Secretary,
Go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for doing this. The 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs, is that because of the whiplash that we've been seeing across the financial markets? How much was, what we saw in the stock markets, a part of this decision?
No, it's because because of the large number of inbounds. We've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause.
Secretary, there was a tweet that you and Secretary Lutnick were in the Oval Office with the President talking about this. Can you talk about what that conversation was like and what you guys said to one another that led to this decision?
Look, it's all the President's decision, and the President had a level in mind to raise the China tariffs, and then he had the 3-month pause in mind, and we were discussing the exact wording. Sorry? Of course.
It's the president's decision.
It's the president's decision. It was the president's decision to wait until today. And again, as I've said in the past, no one creates leverage for himself like President Trump.
Mr.
Secretary. Shelby, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, what does the president want to see by this, I think it's July 9th deadline to keep things paused? Is it just trade barriers coming down, or is it more than that?
These are trade negotiations, but if countries want to come and offer other things. I talked about yesterday that we are thinking about a big LNG project in Alaska that South Korea, Japan, Taiwan are interested in financing and taking a substantial portion of the offtake. But again, in essence, that is trade because it will decrease the trade deficit that we have with those countries. So everything's on the table.
Raquel, go ahead.
Secretary, a clarification on the pause. What happened to those countries who just had 10% baseline tariffs, like Brazil and others? Are they still going to have this 90-day pause? Because you were saying that there will be a tariff of 10% for others. So what happened to those who just had a 10%?
Yeah, that's going to remain.
And do you call this an embargo to China?
Pardon?
You call this an embargo to China, a trade embargo?
I'm not sure what you mean by the word embargo.
125% tariffs, like those, and then impose 84%. Isn't this an embargo?
Well, it's not. It's China's decision that we have the deficit with them. They sell us almost 5 times what we sell them. So again, I think it's an own goal by China.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Secretary, does this signal that you're confident that you're going to be able to strike a satisfactory deal with all these 75 nations that approach you?
It signals that President Trump cares about trade and that we want to negotiate in good faith. And as I said, each one of these is going to be a separate, bespoke negotiation. So we are confident that having seen the other side of where this could go, and it was like I said last week, the market didn't understand. Those were maximum levels. The countries can think about those levels as they come to us to bring down their tariffs, their non-tariff trade barriers. We're going to discuss currency manipulation, subsidy of labor, and industry.
Secretary, as far as you, will the pause also apply to the sectoral tariffs that the president has announced, pharma, lumber, anything else?
No, it's on the reciprocal.
So those will still be coming here soon, right?
Mr.
Secretary, as far as the negotiations with the 75
Andrea, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, so I want to ask you about what you're doing here. So the market is reacting crazily, right?
I haven't seen it.
Do you think that this move is going to change and calm down the market reaction?
What?
Do you think the markets have tanked, right? There's been a lot of volatility in the market, not just in terms of stock markets, but also in terms of bonds. So will this move, in your mind, do you anticipate that this is going to calm the markets down?
Well, I think what we've seen, I think the willingness by more than 75 countries to come and negotiate, I think now the market understands that everything they saw last Wednesday was a ceiling, and now we have a 10% temporary floor, and I think the market, my 35 years in the market, I always wanted certainty, so I think we've got more certainty.
But Mr. Secretary,
Maggie, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, why do people assume this is the last word? The president began this morning saying, be cool. 5 hours later, he announces a new policy. Why will investors in the market assume that this is it?
Because, again, as I said, we've given 90 days, and the only certainty we can provide is that the U.S. is going to negotiate in good faith, and we assume that our allies will too. And in terms of certainty, we will see what China does. But what I'm certain of is that what China is doing will affect their economy much more than it will ours, because they have an export-driven, flood the world with cheap export models, and the rest of the world now understands, because when we put up our tariff wall, those exports were already flowing to the rest of the G7 and to the global south.
Mr. Secretary, how much of this decision was driven by the bond market cratering overnight? What is happening with bonds? Is China selling their bonds?
I have nothing that says that, and we actually had quite a good 10-year auction today, and all this was, again, this was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along, and that, you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors. And we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate, things will turn out well.
What's your message to
There's
the
political articles
Mr.
saying that
Secretary,
the countries weren't getting
these
calls back.
negotiations with these 75 countries, how long will that take? Will it be a matter of weeks? Will it be a matter of months? Do you expect financial markets to be stable during that time period?
Well, we've started with a 90-day pause, and we will see if more countries turn up, what will happen. But we have a meeting with Vietnam today, and we have one of the largest trade deficits with them, so I'm hoping it will move in a good direction. I was at the Japanese ambassador's house last night for the Cherry Blossom Festival, which is quite festive, and he and I had a good chat. They are going to send a deal team over. So we'll see. These are complicated negotiations. These are imbalances that have taken decades to create. But I think having seen the maximum level that Donald Trump is willing to go to, President Trump has created this negotiating leverage.
Excuse me, everybody. Excuse me. The secretary is obviously a very busy man. As he has said, he's had more than 75 countries that the trade team has to respond to. I'd just like to end with this. For decades, Republicans and Democrats have said that these unfair trade practices are ripping off the American people, are ripping off our country, but nobody has ever done anything to address it. We finally have a president here at the White House who is playing the long game, who is doing what is right for the American worker and our industries here at home, and he has put together a fantastic team in Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lustnick, the entire trade team who will be focusing on negotiating these good deals to put the American workers first, and we're going to get to work to do that. Thank you.
What about the EU? What about the EU? They retaliated this morning.
Well, that was the press briefing by the White House press secretary and the secretary in the Commerce Department, Secretary Bessent. And this is a major news that's coming in. They have responded to the questions. They're saying they didn't buckle under any pressure, that this is not under pressure. Trump has decided a hiatus, a pause for countries. It is because they did not retaliate. And of all the countries that have retaliated, China was the worst, according to the White House. And therefore, the retaliation will continue against China, whilst with others, there is going to be a pause of all the reciprocal tariffs that were put in, barring the 10% baseline that will come into effect. Those are important news pointers that are coming out of the White House briefing that just took place outside of the White House. I still have Siddharth Zarabi with me and Karishma. Siddharth, coming to you first. Important statements coming over there. They're very clearly spelling out that this is not Trump doing anything under pressure, that this had to be done, and that they are going to continue fighting China on tariffs.
Okay, multiple things to unpack here. Geeta, I'll try and do it quickly, point by point. Number one, this is a major shift in the language and the tonality of the U.S. aggression that was on display against the world till about 30 minutes ago. Let's take Vietnam as an example. Vietnam was amongst the earliest to say zero tariffs. Tell us what you want to do. We will do everything that you want us to do. Remember, a vast majority of Nike sneakers are manufactured in that country, and there were memes all over social media showing Americans suing their own shoes. What did the U.S. say? Primarily Peter Navarro, who is the force behind this. He said that's not enough. You need to reduce the trade gap, which means there should be equalization, which is the craziest concept in trade that anyone has heard of. That is the extreme hawkish position. The second thing, this is a response to what is happening to U.S. borrowing costs. U.S. borrowing costs in the last 48 hours have gone and shifted in the other direction. The technical word is called bond yields, and yields have moved in a manner in which the actual interest burden on the United States went up. Why did this happen? Because China is retaliating to other ways, including dumping US bonds. So a full-fledged trade war is underway. What you heard the secretary and the White House spokesperson, President Trump's spokesperson, say effectively means that the fight has now been narrowed to a Sino-US fight, a America-Chinese fight. Want to call it a world war, maybe the first world trade war? It is happening. The Trump team has changed tactics. Instead of having everybody in the world against them, they are now trying to say, hey, listen, China is the bad guy. We are the good guys. We are with you. Remember his language that where Trump said literally hours ago that the world is lining up to, pardon my French, kiss my arse. And now they are saying, no, our partners all over the world, our allies, we are with them, China is the bad guy. So a combination of factors, Geeta, has led to this climb down. It is a pause. And one final possibility to outline here, 90 days and 75 trade agreements not happening. So will 90 days become 180? Can it become 900 days? I don't know the answer, but I'm just leaving this thought right here. 90 days, 75 agreements to be done. Clearly, with all the firepower that Trump's trading team may have, it seems to be a logistical improbability.
Absolutely. A tall ask, maybe an impossible one at that. Siddharth Zarabi, thank you so much for joining us. But we did a story on the Musk-Navarro fight, the man who enforced the tariffs and the man who was opposing it. It does seem like Elon Musk has prevailed. This is the big story we'll be tracking here on India Today. It's a big one because it impacts not just the United States of America and China, even if the other countries get a pause. The US-China war will impact global markets, global economy, and we at India Today will be tracking that very closely. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and take care.